Worries. So just to let you all know, this video is being recorded. We do plan to share the video on our website and also send out the recording to all of you. Today, we're here to share information about the Federal Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which we will refer to as PSLF throughout the presentation. We're going to cover tips and resources that you can use to share PSLF information with your employees and support them on the path to attaining student loan forgiveness. The focus of the presentation is for local government employers, which includes cities, counties, municipalities, tribal government employers. If you're joining us from a nonprofit organization or a state government agency, please note that there is some additional information that you need to be aware of. We have included a slide at the end of this PowerPoint with some additional resources for those two employer types. Additionally, this is an employer-focused presentation, not a borrower-focused presentation. We have a variety of resources and recordings available to student loan borrowers, aka your employees, on our website. Following the presentation, you will receive a follow-up message with a link to the webinar video and the presentation slide deck, which will include links that you can click on. This information will also be posted to our Student Loan Advocate webpage. Throughout the presentation, please type your questions using the Q&A function. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question or you think of questions after the presentation, you can actually email them to loanadvocate@wsac.wa.gov, and we'll follow up with you. And we have also included that email address later in the presentation. We have left the chat function open for folks if you'd like to introduce yourselves to each other and engage in dialogue. But please, again, if you have questions, let's use the Q&A function so we can track those better. We want to share a little bit about our work with the PSLF program. So I serve as the Washington Public Service Loan Forgiveness Advocate, and I work within the Office of the Student Loan Advocate over here at the Washington Student Achievement Council. I provide advocacy and technical support for student loan borrowers who have questions or complaints related to their student loans and the PSLF program. One of my primary goals is to further education about PSLF and remove barriers to accessing the program for residents in our state. That includes providing support and education to PSLF qualifying employers who can have a really powerful role to play in the success of PSLF. I'm joined today with two of my colleagues, and I'll let my supervisor, Jessica, share a little bit more about her role.
Thanks, Amber. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Manfredi, and I am Washington's designated student loan advocate. The Office of the Student Loan Advocate works directly with student loan borrowers to address complaints and to help borrowers navigate issues and identify resources, such as the Public Service Loans Forgiveness Program. And as part of my role, I also analyze and monitor laws and policies that can impact student loan borrowers at the federal, state, and local level and make recommendations. As you know, there's a lot of that going on right now, a lot of, unfortunately, not so great, legislation and policies being proposed at the federal level. So we're monitoring those and making sure that, we're speaking on behalf of student loan borrowers that are being negatively impacted by those policies in hopes that they don't come to fruition. We also educate the public about the rights and responsibilities of student loan borrowers. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Terry so she can introduce herself.
Hello, I am Terry Parker, and I work in the State Human Resources Division of the Office of Financial Management. In 2022, Washington's legislature passed PSLF statutes and amendments to improve awareness, increase access, and remove barriers to the PSLF program for Washington's public service employees. My position was created to support that work, and my title is the PSLF Policy and Performance Analyst, and my responsibilities include providing information and direct assistance to state agency employers and their employees for the PSLF employment certification process. As Jessica mentioned, I also collaborate with my colleagues, Amber and Jessica, to provide PSLF resource materials and conduct outreach like this presentation.
Great, thank you both. So during our time together this afternoon, we've got time scheduled up to 3:30. We plan for the presentation to be roughly the first half, and then we'll go, up to 3:30. Well, as long as we have questions. So during our time, we're going to discuss how the federal PSLF program works and where you, as employers or representing your employers, fit into the process requirements. We'll talk about how PSLF can be leveraged as a tool for recruitment and retention. And we'll share tips on helping your employees access the PSLF program, such as sharing notifications with your employees, completing certification requests, tracking data, and suggested records retention if needed. So also, and primarily, we're going to share some resources for you as well as for your employees. So what exactly is PSLF? You may have heard about it. Maybe you've already signed forms for your employees in the past, but we'll give you kind of a baseline here. So the PSLF program was established in 2007 to incentivize talented individuals to make long-term commitments to public service after their education and to recognize the importance of serving our communities. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a federal program, so it's not a state program, it's a federal program that forgives the remaining balance on direct loans after a borrower has made 120 qualifying monthly payments, which is at least 10 years of payments under a qualifying repayment plan while working full-time for an eligible public employer. That's a mouthful. We'll cover a little bit more, and most particularly we'll be focusing on your role as employers in that process. Please note that we might use the term employees or student loan borrowers. We'll use those terms potentially just interchangeably for our purposes today. With the program, the federal government is essentially saying, in exchange for student loan borrowers serving the public by taking government or nonprofit jobs where there's a public need, that they will in turn lighten their financial load after meeting their certain conditions. So understanding the PSLF program and how to navigate earning forgiveness is vital to helping public servants achieve student loan forgiveness. In addition to providing financial wellness for their families, it's meaningful recognition for their dedicated service to helping people in our state. For student loan borrowers, PSLF requires the following 4 criteria that we've noted on this slide. First is the right kind of employment. So all government employment is eligible. This includes federal, tribal, state, city, county, and municipal employers. All 501c3 nonprofit entities are eligible, along with other nonprofit entities that provide certain qualifying public services. As you can see, employment with local government meets that very first criteria, the right type of employment. Student loan borrowers also need the right type of student loan, the right type of repayment plan, and the right number of payments. Detailed information about the PSLF program and these 4 criteria can be found on the Federal Student Aid website that we'll link in our resources at the end of the presentation. As Jessica alluded to a little bit ago, you might have heard that there's different things that are happening and that the federal government is maybe reviewing possible changes to the program. We understand that you or your employees may have concerns or questions. We do have template notices that we're going to cover later in the presentation that invites borrowers to visit the U.S. Department of Education Federal Student Aid website to get the kind of latest information. But right now, it's critical to note that there haven't actually been any changes to the program in recent months. So nothing has changed from what it was prior to January 2025. Please keep that in mind. And we know that there are concerns, but things are still the same as they were. Now let's talk a little bit more in detail about what is considered qualifying employment for PSLF. Employment for PSLF needs to be an average of at least 30 hours a week. This can be one full-time public service job or perhaps multiple part-time jobs that meet that 30-hour per week minimum threshold, as long as they're employment, both their employments meet are with qualifying public service employers. And that this is an average across their employment for a particular time period. Generally, a borrower must be directly employed by the qualifying public employer as a W-2 employee. This means that most contractors will not qualify. The only exception is if a contractor is prohibited by state law to be a direct employee of the public service employer. When we say public service employer, again, that just means any level of government or nonprofit organization. The role or position held for the public service employer does not matter. What matters is that the employer itself is qualifying as a public service employer. We also want to note that borrowers do need to be employed by their public service employer at the time that they apply for forgiveness after they meet the program requirements. So at the end of their 10-year, 120 qualifying payments. I mentioned this earlier, but just as a note, all nonprofits with a 501c3 tax exemption are considered qualifying public employers. Nonprofits with other tax statuses might also be qualifying. It depends on kind of the percentage of their full-time employees dedicated to providing specific qualifying public services in specific areas. We do have a link on this slide for folks that might be here from a nonprofit that you can click on to learn a little bit more about what those qualifying public services are. Okay, and I'm going to pass that over to Jessica.
Thanks, Amber. So as a manager myself, I understand the challenges of recruiting and retaining unique, employees and their unique knowledge, skills, abilities that are needed to accomplish the really hard public service work that we do every day. So I invite you to consider PSLF to be used as a free and low-cost strategy to boost your recruitment and retention efforts. Let's take a moment to experience PSLF from the perspective of some Washington Public Service employees. Shelley Wisty from the Employment Security Department here at Washington State shares that forgiveness is life-changing. It makes it possible not to just survive, but to prosper. Jim Coffey, who works at the nonprofit Cowlitz Family Health Center, shares that this is a burden that has long waited to be relieved and allows me to save loan payments for my retirement. And then finally, Erin Rains shared her perspective as a training and development supervisor with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. The positive impact PSLF has on staff can improve the quality of life for people who work in a very demanding field. It also enables a higher retention rate for agencies. We also have collected data in a 2024 survey of Washington student loan borrowers employed at public service employers, which includes all the categories that we discussed earlier. There were more than 1,600 responses to the survey. 47% of the survey respondents indicated that the promise of earning forgiveness through PSLF affected their decision to begin working in the public sector. And even more revealing is the fact that 65% of the survey respondents said that the promise of student loan forgiveness influenced their decision to stay in public service for at least 10 years. And these results suggest that the opportunity to achieve loan forgiveness through the PSLF program supports recruitment efforts and is especially effective in retaining employees with student loan debt. We shared this to highlight the value and the importance of advertising PSLF as an employee benefit, and to demonstrate that you, as an employer, play a key role in helping your employees access this life-changing benefit, which is the PSLF program. And then the data in this slide further illustrates that PSLF draws candidates due to public service because of the impact of the student loan debt in our state and the opportunity for PSLF to improve the financial wellness of public service employees carrying student loan debt. So in June 2024, Axios reported that the total outstanding student loan debt in Washington was $28.7 billion, representing over 780,000 federal student loan borrowers who have an average of $36,800 of student debt that they're carrying. Now, as of October 2024, 22,010 student loan borrowers in Washington, so a very small percentage of that, right? Which shows that there's a lot more people that can be reached through this program. In Washington, had received a total of $1.52 billion in student loan forgiveness through the PSLF program. This is an average of loan forgiveness of $69,000 per borrower. So we know that the PSLF program draws candidates to public service jobs. However, we have found that employers often overlook the program as a recruitment and retention tool. PSLF can enhance recruitment efforts. As student debt loads rise, people are attracted to public service to take advantage of this benefit. It can also draw candidates with job-related knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are attained through their education. It can improve the employee retention because, as we noted earlier, this is actually by the design of the program. It requires you to stay 10 years in public service employment. So longevity in public service is a requirement for the employee to actually get student loan discharge. It can also improve the employee engagement and work-life balance by relieving some of the stress that is often associated with high student loan debts loads. And we hear about that stress every day as loan advocates here. So by helping your employees through this program, you really are making, I'm not sugarcoating, life-changing work for your employees. And the value of PSLF to you, obviously, as an employer, is that all of these benefits are available with very little effort and are essentially to no cost to your organization because the forgiveness comes from the federal government, right?
I just want to, real quick, Jessica and Terry, just highlight how amazing it is that employees have access to this. If you think, that average debt load that students have was around, 35,000. Can you imagine like that being just the benefit that you receive for doing your job, right? Like it's a big deal.
It's a lot more than an employer could ever offer in terms of, any kind of reimbursement opportunities. True. So thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Amber. PSLF is truly amazing and almost an unimaginable benefit. So now let's explore a little bit about how our participants as an employer can support your employees in accessing PSLF. So we have found through the work that we do that there are 4 actions employers can take to improve access and remove barriers to the PSLF program. And these come from both our 2024 survey results as well as the experience that we've each had helping borrowers over the years. So the first step is to designate a PSLF point of contact, and that person or a group of people would certify employment. Second is to share PSLF information with your employees on a regular basis. Third is to post PSLF contact information on internal and external websites. And fourth, and very importantly, to advertise that you are a PSLF qualifying employer. So now let's investigate these steps a little deeper. So employees are often confused about how to submit their PSLF employment certification forms, who should sign it. So a really important first step is to get a program in place within your staff to help support this effort. And there are two key designations that should be made. First of all, who will be the point of contact for completing forms? Second is what email address should employees use to submit their form? And we'll talk a little bit more about both of these. According to federal student aid, an authorized individual is anyone in your organization who has access to and is authorized to review employment information about your employees, such as dates of employment. You can appoint one or more staff members to serve in this role. And while that's where I come from. While HR staff are typically assigned to this role, anyone can be appointed as an authorized official who meets that definition. You need to review the completion process with your designees and also explain any records retention requirements. Next slide. Establishing the email address that employees will use to submit PSLF certification forms is really critical. We'll go into depth about the actual form and process itself, but just know most forms will come to you via email. And I often, as a state agency support, get emails that have been submitted to a working mailbox just because people didn't know where else to send it. And so, if possible, use a general email address such as an HR mailbox or other email address that will ensure messages are not missed due to staff absences or staffing changes. And ensure, of course, that your designated point of contact has access to that email address. Employees can submit PSLF forms to an employer in two ways. The preferred option is for the borrower to complete the form digitally on the studentaid.gov website using the PSLF help tool. This tool allows employees and employers to digitally sign the PSLF form using DocuSign. Forms are processed most quickly using this method. And to do that, the employee will need your employee identification number or EIN and the PSLF contact email that they should use. And both of that information gets entered by them into the PSLF help tool. That the federal student aid system then will forward the form to the employer to be digitally signed, and it also returns the form using the PSLF help tool. And then that is submitted by FSA for automatic processing. We'll share a link that explains to employers how to tackle the PSLF form as an employer, including some helpful tips. Employees can also submit a paper form or a PDF to the employer for signature. This option requires the borrower to take an additional step to either mail, fax, or upload the manual form to their FSA student aid account. And if this option is used, the employer will also want to encrypt any electronic communications to protect the employee's confidential, personally identifiable information. I'll just make a note too, we've got a lot of links on the slides. They're provided together at the end of the presentation, and they'll be accessible through the copy of the slide deck that will be posted. So this shows, the slide shows what it looks like when a student borrower is in their studentaid.gov account and accessing the PSLF help tool. And this is an employer search tool. So we shared already that local government organizations are qualifying employers, and there are no exclusions to that. However, it's possible that your organization's information is not included in the Federal Student Aid's employer search database, or that the information could be incorrect. So a proactive step you can take is to check and see that your organization is listed as a PSLF eligible employer using the employer search tool. You don't have to have an account to do that, and we have provided links. So the first step you would take is to enter your organization's Federal Employee Identification Number, or EIN, and then some mock employment information. So you could even use today's date as a date in there, and then click on the search button. So this slide shares what it looks like if your information is already known. So we're showing how the Student Achievement Council is an eligible employer. And then we've also provided an example of an ineligible result. And this was a search a while ago for the Washington Wine Commission. It's a state agency. And at that point in time, it was erroneously noted as ineligible in the database. So we just want to show you what that looks like. So once you've confirmed the status of your organization, if it's eligible, great. This means your employees can submit electronic PSLF forms with no issues. Again, we'll review that form in more detail in a future slide. If your organization shows up as anything else, so the options are ineligible, undetermined, or not found, your employee will need to submit additional documentation along with their PSLF form. So another way to proactively help your employees is to know this in advance so that you can help them gather the documentation that they need and let them know what to expect when they're submitting their information. And examples of the required documentation are a W-2 statement, the state or local statutes that establish your organization as a government organization, and documentation of your organization's federal employer ID number or employee identification number. So once a form is approved, FSA will change your organization's status to eligible. And I do want to share that this can be, it takes a while for this to happen if you have to go through that process. What happens after the documentation is submitted is Financial Student Aid reviews the employee's PSLF form and the submitted documentation. And once it gets approved, they automatically change the status in the employer search tool to be eligible. And from that point forward, any other submissions for your organization will be processed automatically. Currently, there is no way for an organization to proactively notify federal student aid of its eligibility. It is only done through this employment certification process. But the one proactive step you can do is to see whether you're eligible or not so that you can help your employees through that process. And also, please make sure that your employees know what the employee identification number is. I have to say, I've talked with employers, people in the HR office who don't know what their employee identification number is. It's a common item when you're processing payments or contracts. It's really common for the payroll team to know the EIN, but for me, I'd have to go find my W-2 statement or my tax form to figure that out for myself. So putting that information on the website is important. And now Amber will share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, it's the employer identification number that federal employer, so not employee. Just make sure to clarify.
Sorry.
And I will say, so if as a representative of your employer, go on to the search tool, put in the EIN, search the dates, and it comes up with one of those, ineligible, undetermined, not found. If you're not sure kind of what the next steps are, you're also welcome to reach out to us for assistance. So please don't, we're providing this information, but we're also a resource for you as well as for borrowers. All right, so now that your employees know that you're a PSLF qualifying employer, it's important for you to share that with them, that someone is available at your organization to sign their PSLF employment certification forms on a regular basis. And sometimes we say PSLF form, sometimes we say employment certification form or PSLF employment certification form. It's all the same, different kind of colloquial language has been used throughout the evolution of the form. We think of it as PSLF form with borrowers, but when we're talking with employers, we think of it as employment certification form. So, but it's all one and the same. With that said, so it's helpful for you to include your PSLF certification point of contact on your employee benefit web pages. Also, providing regular PSLF information to your employees has a couple different benefits. Well informing employees of this vital benefit available through your employment. It also provides the opportunity for employees to tell family and community members about the program. We found that word of mouth and personal connections are often really crucial in helping borrowers access the program or learn about the program, or hear about it, or hear maybe, oh, someone else is pursuing it. Maybe it's something that I should look into. Our team has actually created some notifications to assist you in sharing about the PSLF program. They're meant to be as a starting point that can be modified to fit your organization brand or communication style. The next slide has the links to these templates, but I did want to note before I kind of review those templates that we are in the process of updating them and kind of streamlining them. We do plan to send out an email to those that are on our PSLF employer email list when those new templates are ready. So here we have 4 different suggested notices, and these notices actually stem from requirements that state agencies have for sending out these notices to employees. And so we have adjusted what is sent out to state employees to be a little bit more broadly applicable to local government and nonprofits. So each of these 4 notices appears similar, but they have different messaging depending on where an employee is at in their employment and in their PSLF journey. So let me go ahead and just review each of them. So we have a PSLF annual notice. We recommend sharing this letter with your employees on an annual basis, and also anytime that PSLF regulations change. And that is because employees are encouraged to certify their employment annually to continue to make progress and continued eligibility for PSLF. In addition, rules and regulations can change from time to time. And so sending the letter whenever those rules are updated can help keep employees informed. We have a PSLF recertification reminder. So this is typically used and is specific to folks who have maybe already submitted a PSLF form to you in the past. And if this is information that you track, you can send a notice to those employees a year after the fact to remind them to recertify their employment. We recommend sending a notice for new employees. This would be an onboarding notice to introduce the program, again, help raise awareness of it, and provide some key steps for the employee to take in order to enroll and eventually qualify for forgiveness. If sending an email is too much, even including it as a part of your onboarding checklist with, a link to more information would be beneficial. Finally, we have a PSLF notice for separated employees. So we recommend sharing this with employees when they resign from your organization or perhaps retire or leave, right? This is extremely important because borrowers have reported to us in the past that it can be hard to get their employment certified after they have left an employer, right? So you can retroactively certify employment going back to 2007. And so it can be hard, if you've left somewhere after 2 years or 3 years, trying to go back and get that employment certified. So having a note, either an email or something, a part of like an offboarding checklist, it can be beneficial to remind folks to make sure to do that as a part of their leaving process. We also want to note that employees need to be actively employed with their public service employer when they submit their last form with the final request for loan discharge. So when they've kind of reached the end of their 10 years or 120 qualifying monthly payments, they still need to be employed when they submit their application in order to receive the benefit. As someone that's been working in the chaotic world of student loans over the last year and a half, I'll be the first to tell you that everything seems to be constantly changing. While many changes in the past few years to the program have benefited borrowers, a lot of borrowers are actually unaware and perhaps confused about those changes. They may have previously written off the program based on outdated information. And so you can play a key role in alleviating that issue by providing updated PSLF information to your employees. To make this as easy as possible for you, our office has created a mailing list that you can subscribe to. And at any time that there are relevant changes to the program or updates to resources like the templates for those notices, we'll share that with you so that you can share that with your employees. We also have a borrower specific list that your employees can sign up for as well. And I believe we have that included in our resources at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have questions about the PSLF program as an employer after this presentation, you can reach out to us for support. Jessica and myself are over at the Office of the Student Loan Advocate. You can always email us at loanadvocate@wsac.wa.gov.
Thank you, Amber. Now let's review how to communicate this information that we've covered about PSLF resources to your employees. You may be asking yourself, what is the best way to distribute this information to my employees, right? The most important resource you can use is the letter templates, right, that we mentioned earlier in the presentation. We also recommend maintaining PSLF information, such as the links that we shared on your intranet or public-facing websites. Again, this is a cost-free recruitment and retention tool that you can use. We recommend including the PSLF point of contact, your EIN, and the PSLF email address available on a public-facing website. And this is because, again, when people are looking to get certified, especially after they leave, if they're able to find that information on your website, that makes it a lot easier for them. And a PSLF phone number can also be helpful. So the phone number of the point of contact or points of contact, it's helpful, but it's not required. And putting this information on your public-facing website serves as an advertisement to prospective employees. It ensures separated employees, once again, have information they need to get the PSLF form signed. We often hear that these two things are a big barrier for borrowers trying to achieve PSLF forgiveness, right? That some employees say that they have difficulty figuring out who to contact in their organization to be able to complete the form. So if you can make that easy for your employees, you are already 10 steps ahead. You can also share some of the PSLF resources that we have provided on our resource slides. The fourth action that you can do is to advertise that you're a PSLF qualifying employer. And how do you do that, right? To leverage the benefits of PSLF for your organization, you need to inform job seekers, right? People that are looking for work, that employment with you will lead is a qualification for the program, right? That you can qualify for PSLF if they work for you. Now, here is an example of a statement that you can include either on individual job postings, external or internal job boards, wherever you're posting your jobs, to let those prospective employees know that you are a qualifying employer. You can also use this statement on your employer benefits section of the website, right? So that if somebody is trying to find out what benefits you offer, they also can find out about the program through those means.
All right, so we're getting there. We just want to share specifically that, again, reiterate that your staff may have heard in the news that the federal government is reviewing possible changes to the program. And we do understand that there may be concerns and questions about that. So we're providing a link where folks can go to the U.S. Department of Education's student aid website for the latest information regarding what's happening. So we'll include that with, here we go, with this slide. It's a link here at the top. And so the Federal Student Aid website has a specific page on public service loan forgiveness. It has instructions on step-by-step how to complete the PSLF form using the PSLF help tool, and that includes some screenshots. There is how an actual page and an application portal for income-driven repayment plan, how to manage their public service loan forgiveness progress using their studentaid.gov account. And then there are some help videos from the Department of Education. This next slide, I'm gonna share my bias, which is that the Washington Student Loan Advocate has, and so this is Jessica and Amber at this point in time, they have provided some excellent tools to help both employers and employees navigate this process. We are fortunate to be one of very few states, like 11 or 12 states, that actually have laws that support student loan advocacy through consumer protection laws and regulatory functions by our Department of Financial Institutions. And I think most important, the Washington Student Achievement Council has established a student loan bill of rights, and the provisions in that are navigated and managed by Jessica and Amber in their roles. So this is just a short highlight of the links available on their website. So there's a quick PSLF fact sheet, detailed steps to apply for PSLF, frequently asked questions, and a large ability is for student loan borrowers to submit questions or complaints to them through the Washington Student Complaint Portal. And this allows both questions and complaints about student loan servicers in the PSLF realm. And then we just need to clarify, because we recognize that there might be some other employers in the room with us beyond local government. If you work in a Washington state agency, you're part of Washington state government, and this includes our public institutions of higher education, please visit OFM's PSLF page. It includes we do have a specific PSLF certification program requirements for state agencies. So the information that you need to be aware of for that is included there, along with the email box that you can send questions to. And for our nonprofit employers, the Student Loan Advocate's website includes a specific section on information about that for you. So to highlight some of the things we've shared, you can refer employees to the Student Loan Advocate for help. Borrowers may submit a complaint or questions about their loans to the Office of the Student Loan Advocate, and this includes questions about their PSLF loans and processes, credits, income-driven repayment plans. If they are in delinquency or default, there's information about deferments and forbearance, loan forgiveness and discharges and the process for that, loan consolidations, and any other student loan questions they may have. So the link at the bottom of this page actually takes you into that portal. And then the very last slide, if you want to roll forward, Amber, these are the links that were actually presented in the slides throughout the program. We just think it might be helpful to have them all in one place. And next, Jessica is going to lead our question and answer session.
Thank you, Terry. Really appreciate it. So we have a lot of time for questions. So I see that some folks that already submitted questions both on the chat and in our Q&A. So keep them going because we want to make sure that we cover as many of the concerns that you might have at this point in time about the program. Not Terry, Amber, do you want to go ahead and start going through some of those questions?
Yeah, so it looks like we've got 4 questions. And so this is the opportunity, please, if you've got questions, throw them in the Q&A so that we can address them. No question is silly or we want to make sure that folks get a good understanding and take some good things away from this webinar. So our first question, sorry if I missed this, but do we help our employees fill this out at any time, or do they have to fulfill the eligibility requirements first, like the 10 years of payments?
So that is a great,
yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Sorry. So that's a great question, right? So the answer is both, which I know is a little confusing. So somebody could go for 10 years making their payments right under student loans and wait until they've been employed for 10 years in the public service while making those payments to then submit their PSLF form or forms, right? We don't typically recommend that people do that for a couple of reasons, right? There are some very specific requirements that people need to be meeting while they're going through the program, right? The employment piece is a part of it, but there's, 3 other things that we mentioned earlier that can be a little bit confusing for borrowers as they're going through the process, right? So because that there's those requirements that they need to meet while they're employed with you, right? We often recommend that people actually submit their form every year. And the reason for that is that, one, that makes sure that they're covering getting credit along the way, right? They are aware of like how many more payments they have to make before they qualify for forgiveness. And 2, if for some reason they're not meeting one of those requirements, for example, the one that I find that is the most common, maybe they're in the wrong repayment plan, right, to be on PSLF. They're going to find out that information once they apply because the Federal Senate will tell them that information like, hey, unfortunately, you don't qualify for the program right now because you're in the correct repayment plan, but here's what you can do to switch to the right repayment plan so that you can eventually qualify, right? So while, yes, technically somebody could wait 10 years and then apply for the program after making those 10 years of qualifying payments, we don't recommend that. We actually recommend that they do it every year and every time they switch employers.
And I want to just add to that, as employers, you are not expected to know, whether or not they're going to qualify or to be able to answer those types of questions. Your role in the process is really to let employees know that this is available. And then when employees go to fill out the forms, and they're the ones responsible for filling the forms out, if they do it through that help tool that Terry was talking about earlier, that if they have access to who to send the form to, it'll send a DocuSign request to the point of contact email. And so that needs to be completed by the employer. So that's verifying their full-time versus part-time status, average hours per week, and dates of employment. So when they started and whether they're still employed or have an end date, and then a signature by the authorized official. So that is kind of the kind of key responsibility that employers have is to do that certification process. Even if an employee is a part-time employee, you can certify that they were part-time for those hours, and you don't need to know whether they had another job that they were also working to meet the requirement. That's on the employee to find out. So we see the employer role as really, doing the certification requirements and making sure folks know that this is an option when they start, as they're continued to be employed with you, and when they leave your organization. And then just providing that information that they need in order to complete the form. So that EIN, the contact person, and email are those kind of primary key pieces of information. Sorry, Jessica, I kind of hijacked the end of that question there. Couldn't help myself. Our next question, and I think we kind of addressed this, but if you want to just maybe expand a little bit, do people applying for PSLF need to submit an application every year?
No, but it is highly recommended that they do so.
Excellent. Okay. I see, Terry, you're typing an answer to Denise, but yes, we will be sending out the slide deck with the clickable links, as well as a link to the recording of this presentation for folks who attended. And then we'll also be sending it to our greater PSLF employer list, email list. Jessica, can you apply for PSLF if you've consolidated your loans?
Great question, right? I want to make sure that to address this question, we actually explain what loan consolidation is and what it isn't, because people can usually get privately refinancing your loans with and loan consolidation with the federal government conflicted, right? Because those terms can be used interchangeably. So if somebody has consolidated their federal student loans with the federal government, meaning their loans are now all consolidated into one loan, but it's still owned by the federal government, the answer is yes, they can still apply for PSLF. Now, if the person has refinanced their student loans with a private company, some names that come to mind is like Discover, SoFi, et cetera. Like there's a lot of companies out there that will privately refinance the loans and make that into a private debt, right? Like no longer owned by the federal government. If somebody has privately refinanced their student loans, unfortunately, they can no longer apply for PSLF because that debt is no longer owned by the federal government.
All right. Is the income-driven repayment plan the default, or does the employee need to ask for it? And if not, and they have found that the repayment wasn't converted, are they starting over?
Great questions, Jana. So the income-driven repayment plan is not the default, right? And the employer has to ask for it by applying for it, right? So hopefully that answers your two questions. And then if not, does that mean that if the employee now finds out that they weren't in the right repayment plan, do they have to start over? The answer to that question is a little bit more nuanced because in recent years, people were able to get credit for repayment in which they were not in an income-driven repayment plan. There was some limited time opportunities that allowed people up until fall of last year to get a lot of credit for those payments that didn't count. So the answer might be that yes, they might have some credit even though they weren't in an income-driven repayment plan. But if the person, for example, graduated today, let's just say, and they make payments for like a year, and they've been in the wrong repayment plan, and then they submit a PSLF form, they might find out at that point in time that yes, that maybe those payments for the past year didn't count. But hey, at least they're finding it out now after just 1 year of payments instead of like 10 years of payment, which this is exactly the reason why we emphasize that people should be submitting those PSLF forms every year to avoid situations like this. So short answer to your question is that yes, they might still have credit from some past payments, but it's really going to depend on their specific situation. And if they have any questions, they can submit a question to our office.
And again, if you get questions like that from your employees, you can refer them to the resources that we've shared with you, or we'll be sharing with you. You can refer them to our offices. If you are kind of your PSLF point of contact for folks at your organization, if you are wanting to learn a little bit more, just so you have a little bit more context when you're talking with folks, you can take the initiative and maybe watch one of our borrower specific webinars that we have on our website, for instance, or take a look at the resources yourself just to kind of get maybe the perspective from the borrower, the employee side, to have a sense of what their process is like. Kim asks, as an employer, how do we update our address? We are showing as an eligible employer, but it says no address on file. Terry, do you want to take this one?
I will take it. Essentially, but I might need my colleagues here to help me out at the end of my answer. So there is no way to update your address. I am unclear. I think all of us are unclear exactly what, if any, connection lives between the system that produces and maintains records for the employee identification number versus what's in the employer search tool. I don't believe it matters whether there's an address for you on file, just because affirming that it doesn't matter. As long as you are showing as eligible, just complete the form for your employees and it will get processed through FSA. And as long as those other three conditions are correct or active, then they'll go ahead and get credit. So Amber, feel free to add if I've forgotten anything on that answer.
Yeah, the entries that are in the employer search tool were generated based on prior forms that were submitted. And so, I can't remember the current iteration of the PSLF form, if it has a spot for the employer address. It's possible that it did previously and maybe it was inputted incorrectly. If it has that spot still when the employer or the employee goes in to fill it out, that they can change that information, that would generally get updated, but there's not a way to proactively go and change your organization's information on that website. It only gets updated through the submission of PSLF forms. All right, Jackie asks, do we have to use the PSLF notification templates provided by OFM, or can we create our own templates customized to our agency with all the required information?
I mean, y'all don't have to do anything.
Yeah, right. I was going to say those templates.
The best answer. So no, I mean, if you want to customize it to your heart's desire, go ahead, right? The one thing that I will say that is important to say is that it's something that we still struggle with, is like conveying the message of the requirements to borrowers. If you can keep those 4 requirements as they are, I would recommend doing that, just because like a minor tweaking to those words can make a borrower understand the requirements in a way that's not correct, right? But outside of those 4 requirements, you can probably change anything and it would still be okay. So that would be my recommendation to you.
Yeah, and I would say, Jackie, if for some reason that you work for a state agency and you're here, I would recommend reaching out to Terry to talk about that as well. Just, and knowing that there might be some folks in the room that are state agency, and state agencies are required to send those notifications to their employees. And so whether or not they're required to use the OFM template, that I'm not sure about if that's applicable. So I would say connect with Terry if you are a state agency employer. Becky asks, I tried to look at my organization by our EIN and it came back no results found. Did I hear correctly that we can't proactively get added?
Correct, Becky. You cannot proactively get added. The only way to add currently an employer is by one of your employees actually submitting a form with your information and with the additional documentation that we outlined. Right. So what I would recommend to you, if you want to be proactive, right, is to maybe gather those documents and have it saved in a folder, so that whenever somebody comes to you and says, I want to submit my PSLF form, you can let them know like, oh, actually, unfortunately, we're not on the database yet, but here is the information that you need to submit with your form so that we can get added to the database and you can get into the PSLF program and also our future employees can not have to go through this hassle and be able to get access to the program. But great question. Unfortunately, there's no way to proactively do it. If you just want to be proactive, I would just recommend, again, having all the documents that we highlighted somewhere accessible to whoever is your PSLF contact, so that whenever somebody submits a form, they can send that information to the employee.
And I would say the proactive part of that is, send that notice out to your employees. If you know that you're a local government organization, you're eligible. It's just that maybe no one in your organization has ever submitted a form, because again, that's the only way that those entries are created, is someone submitting a form and then those being reviewed to see whether that employer is eligible. And so if you're a local government employer, you're eligible. It's just no one from your organization has applied before. And so by sending out an annual notice, maybe that prompts one of your employees to start that process. And maybe the first person that reaches out with you, maybe you work with them a little bit to, and connect us with our office as well to make sure that we get them with the correct documentation that they'll need, that they can upload with their form, so that, your organization can then be considered to be added to the database. And again, that process, when an employee submits a form for the first time, for an employer to be reviewed and then added to the system, can potentially take like a year. At least that's the last time that we had that issue. It took about that long. So the federal government does not always work quickly. Just putting that out there in case, maybe you've already submitted a form or had an employee submit a form and they still haven't heard back. That's not unusual. This is a great question. Jessica, is there a maximum amount that can be forgiven through PSLF?
No, there's no maximum amount, which again makes this a very, very unique and valuable benefit to employees.
Yeah, and I'll say, the average that we provided earlier, right, that roughly 35,000 per borrower, that's just an average. We know that there are borrowers that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Those are typically folks that maybe went to law school or medical school. Some folks that maybe have, Parent Plus loans, which are loans that parents take out on behalf of their children. Some folks, they only get maybe a little bit forgiving because that's just what they have left at the time that they meet those requirements. But other folks, they have the potential to have quite a bit of loan debt forgiven. So, there's no limit currently.
Would you like me to read the questions that landed in the chat?
Yes, please. I don't have that pulled up since I'm sharing my screen.
Okay, so we've already answered the first few, but there was a really good, hold on. Sorry, my computer's being super slow. Okay. This is from Stella Rajik. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I apologize if I didn't. Some temporary or summer employees work variable hours that are not easy to summarize in one field, such as numbers of hours worked, or they worked a couple of jobs at the same time, each with the schedule of a few hours. Jessica, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
I think you can.
Okay, so
I get questions like that all the time.
yeah. What you can do when there are variable hours is look at the time frame that the employment is being certified for and add up all the hours and divide it by the number of weeks that were worked. Then you can determine whether the employee met the 30-hour threshold, in which case you could say that they were full-time during that period. And if they don't, then you say that they are part-time during that period. Another scenario that we've encountered is people are intermittent or seasonal. And so they'll work some hours for a period of time, and then there will be a break where they don't report any hours, and then they come back and they work some more. the employee can also submit multiple forms for those periods of employment where they would have qualifying number of hours. And again, we're available if you have scenario questions like that that need to be answered.
And I'll add just a note on that as well. You know, we recommend that folks submit PSLF forms at least annually, like as a bare minimum. But there is nothing that prevents an employee from submitting, you know, they could submit a form every month. I mean, it might get a little tedious if they're doing that, but they actually could, you know, if they know for you know, for the summer months that they're going to be working a different set of kind of time period, well, maybe encourage them to submit one PSLF form up to the time right before it changed, and then they could submit another one once that then next time period changes. So there's nothing stopping folks from submitting multiple forms like that. And you might just have to, you know, if that's, you know, an issue, or when they submit a form and you're like, well, this doesn't represent the full employment situation, you can then just reach out to the employee individually before signing the form to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to do that. Maybe we submit two separate forms instead of one.
I can just add to that, if they're using the electronic PSLF help tool system, the minute they submit another form, the last one on file that's open will be closed. And so there's no worry about overlapping. Like, I submitted one, my employer contacted me and said, this doesn't accurately represent your employment. They submitted another one. That first form is just made inactive, and then the employer can act on the follow-up form that comes through. I had another point, but okay, so Marilyn has another question, but I think there's a follow-up, there's another one here in the chat that I think would be good to answer. When did the save forbearance period start? Jessica.
I'll answer that. I'm pretty sure it was July 18th, 2024. So we're almost at the year mark.
So, Rachel, I'm assuming you might be a borrower. Just because that's a question that like would most likely. I don't expect anybody in this call to know the answer to that question, is what I'm saying. Like, if you're an employer and somebody has a question about the safe forbearance, just direct them to our office, right? That you all have no, I mean, if you want to be super aware of what's going on in the world of student loans, yes, great. But like, we don't, that's not an expectation, is what I'm saying. Don't worry about what the safe forbearance is what I'm saying. Worry about the other things that we mentioned so far.
Okay, you've got so there's a Q&A question, I'll just call it out. So Marilyn says, just to clarify, if an employee is on an income-based repayment plan, they still qualify for the forgiveness program?
Yes, and in fact, it is a requirement for them to be in an income-based repayment plan for most people to qualify, right? So yes, they qualify if they're in an income-based repayment plan, and they have for 99% of people, they have to be in an income-driven repayment plan to be able to qualify for PSLF. It's part of how the program was built.
I'll add to that.
Go ahead, Amber. I have something I want to add about timeframes, but just to mark my spot in case I forget again, you guys can remind me. Go ahead, Amber.
I will say, so obviously this presentation was focused on public service loan forgiveness. There are other types of forgiveness programs that exist for federal student loans that are completely unrelated to current employment. And so, you know, because you mentioned income-based repayment, there's a type of forgiveness with that particular repayment plan that's, again, unrelated to employment. So there are different types, so kind of, you know, be kind of conscientious of that. And I will also mention income-driven repayments is the kind of umbrella term for any repayment plan that's based on your income and family size. There are different types of those income-driven repayment plans that have different names. So you might hear income-based, income-driven, pay-as-you-earn. Those are all types of income-driven repayment plans, but they're not all necessarily exactly the same, but they all do qualify for PSLF.
I just wanted to highlight from the employer perspective, to be aware that there are protected leave of absences that don't change an employee's status. So, for example, I am a full-time employee. I go out on paid family medical leave or whatever your organization may call family medical leave. That is protected through the PSLF federal laws, and an employee's status doesn't change if they were to be either taking paid leave or even unpaid leave during that period of time. You, as the employer, still see them as a full-time employee. What matters is their status when they went out on the leave. And that's not the only type of leave. I just don't have them all memorized, so I don't want to call out all the different types. So if Jessica or Amber, you guys have anything you want to add to that, but that was a new learning for me, and so I just want to highlight that.
Just that things like vacation time, so if folks use their vacation time or PTO, that's counting as like towards their full-time or status, right? So you don't exclude those hours or anything like that. All
All the
right.
questions in the chat have been answered at this point.
Okay. I'm fine, give it maybe another minute if someone's typing out a question on the Q&A or the chat. Something I'll throw out there, if there is something as an employer that you think would be beneficial as a resource that we can potentially work on and provide, please reach out to us. Put it in the chat now if you're like, oh, this would be great. Or if you think of something later, feel free to send us an email. A lot of our efforts over the last couple of years that this role has been around have been borrower focused. And so we're really, keeping up the borrower focused outreach and presentations, but we're really working to expand our outreach and connections with employers. And so I would say that's kind of our next step in our development of resources. So please share your ideas. This is a very collaborative area. As Jessica mentioned at the very beginning, we're always working with other agencies, other states, on student loan topics. So we welcome collaboration. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. Yes, Jessica, do you want to talk about that? I just saw your post in the chat.
Yes, but I think we should answer Rachel's question. She has another question. So she's asking about when the next borrowers webinar is going to be. Rachel, we don't have one currently scheduled, but sometime soon. And if you're signed up to receive emails from us, you will get a notification when that happens. Can you go to the next slide, Amber, real quick? All right, and while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any more questions, right? Again, feel free to post those in the chat or the Q&A. We would love if you could take 5 minutes of your time to let us know how we're doing, right? So we have a very short survey that I posted the link to in the chat for you. You also, if you're tech savvy, can use the QR code on the screen right now to be able to answer that, that survey for us. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know how this presentation went. And you can also, there's a place in that survey for you to let us know any ideas that you have of things that we can do for you as an employer, right? To help you through the, help your employees get PSLF, right? So if you could take a moment to do that survey, we would really appreciate it. We love getting feedback about these presentations and try to make them better every time. So thank you.
Yes, and I'd add that we're Definitely would love feedback on this presentation. This is actually our first, I would say, like public facing employer presentation that's a wider spread. We've done a couple of smaller presentations with specific organizations. If you have feedback on, things that we can improve or what you really liked, please share that. We very much appreciate it. Okay, I haven't seen anything new as far as questions pop up in the chat or the Q&A. So I think we're probably okay to go ahead and end the webinar. Again, this webinar will be recorded and the slides will be sent out to everyone who signed up to attend, as well as to our PSLF employer list. Excuse me. And it'll also be posted on our website. So you will receive the resources. We have all the links available that we talked about for both employers and employees. Thank you all very much for attending and joining us today. And we hope to connect with you again in the future. Any last words, Terry or Jessica?
I just want to say thanks for being here. Thanks for promoting public service loan forgiveness. And thanks for being an advocate for your employees.
Yes, thank you. Hope everybody has a good rest of your day.